voice of FinTech.
Welcome to Voice of FinTech, a podcast mapping out the Swiss and global FinTech scene, connecting FinTech enthusiasts with startups, incubators, accelerators, business angels and VCs, and incumbents interested in partnerships. Voice of FinTech will help you navigate the FinTech ecosystem. Here you can listen to the startup founder stories, what investors and incumbents are looking for when dealing with startups, and find out more about resources provided by incubators and accelerators. My name is Rudy Falad and I'll be hosting this podcast. Hello and welcome to Voice of FinTech. Today we're joined by two ladies, Ani and Araminta, who are going to explain to us how to play the marketing game in the FinTech space. It's not only about social media and influencers and SEO and things like this, or maybe it is, all of it together. We'll find out more how to do FinTech marketing. So welcome, Ani and Araminta. How are you today?
Hello. Hi, Rudolf. Good. Thank you. Thank you for having us. It's a pleasure.
Hi, Rudolf. Great to be here too. Looking forward to chatting about marketing.
Great. And you're joining us from Switzerland and Scotland. So amazing that we can turn the current situation into a positive and we can all talk at the same time. So first question is, we always ask people, how did you end up doing what you're doing? And why, right? So how did you end up interested and working in FinTech marketing? And then secondly, why have you joined forces together?
Well, so I think like many of us in FinTech, kind of by accident. Really, it all started when I was working for a FinTech company in Barcelona. It was a neobank, a bit like Revolut, a bit like Monzo, etc. But it was the Barcelona version. And I was working there. I was helping them with their content. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. And after 6 months, I decided to go freelance. And I traveled a bit. And I worked for some other neobanks in Malaysia, in UK, in Spain. So I was a freelancer, and this gave me kind of like an entire, an opportunity to explore many different kinds of FinTech and marketing, obviously. The more work I did, the more I learned about content marketing and how special and even different it is in the FinTech world. So I kind of developed that, and eventually, I landed to where I am now in one country in the UK, and I kind of keep growing this business and help other FinTechs from all around the world with their marketing. So yeah, it just started, as working for a FinTech, and now here I am on my own. And it's a lot of fun because I get to work with a lot of different companies and mainly content marketing, but still learning a lot. So a lot of fun.
All right. And Ani, are you having fun as well, or you have a different story?
No, yeah, definitely. I think my story is slightly different because I've always, I started my career. I'm one of those few people who actually started their careers in FinTech. I've always had this interest in finance and accounting. To be honest, I actually did specialized in accountancy and finance at uni. So after I graduated, I was actually looking for a finance related job, but eventually I ended up at doing a graduate position, client-facing role at a very early stage RegTech startup in London. So that's how I actually entered the startup space. And so they were specializing in financial reporting. I had some great fun. It's actually probably one of my most valuable experiences ever because I learned so much. At that time, I initially started in sales and account management, but then it turned out I wasn't that good at selling. So I eventually moved to marketing. And at that point, I was the only marketing executive at that startup. So I was doing pretty much everything, from content creation to managing campaigns, to putting together strategy, working with the founders. It was a lot of fun. And then after that, I actually moved to a slightly more organized position. I moved to a leading brokerage company. And then my last corporate position was in wealth management. So based on my previous experience in financial services and technologies, when I decided to do my own thing 2.5 years ago, I started freelancing. I thought it would be really good to focus on the niche of FinTech and FinTech marketing. For the past few years, I've been working with just like Araminta, with a lot of with startups and scale-ups and helping them with their marketing efforts.
All right. So tell us about the FinTech Marketing Hub. What's your mission? What's the goal here?
Yeah, I started the FinTech Marketing Hub last year in July. So it's only been live for a little over 6 months now, 7 months. My initial idea was to to create a space, a safe and friendly space for fintech marketers, for both professionals and enthusiasts. Because to be honest, when I started freelancing, I started connect with people in the industry. I started looking for all these insights, to see what people were doing, to connect with people. And it was pretty difficult. There wasn't a single source where you can access, insights and information and news about what's happening in the world of, of course you can learn about, you have the traditional outlets, media outlets and you have some fintech specific outlets, but not a fintech marketing one. The main mission is to bring the whole community together, to tell some really exciting stories, to find, everything happening in the world of fintech marketing, how people are doing fintech marketing, and to provide a platform for people where they can connect, grow, and learn from together and learn from each other. And during this time, I actually met Araminta over the web, and to be honest, I really instantly fell in love with her style and her obsession with fintech. I'll let her talk more about that. But she was, because there isn't that many of us out there, I must say. So it was really fascinating, and I instantly thought, I really wanted to do something with her, to work together. And when I launched the hub, I offered to her, for her to come on board, and she accepted, and here we are.
There's just one thing I think, and obviously I greatly enjoyed, and I was very grateful to Annie for inviting me. This is a very interesting project that we're working on. But I think what's important to note here is, why is marketing of fintech different than other companies or other industries? And this is what's important here. And this is why the FinTech Marketing Hub is different from any other marketing hub. And so what I usually come to is three main things. There are three main reasons why I believe that fintech marketing is different to other kinds of marketing. The first one is education. Finance is a world that's full of jargon, complex topics, and customers actually need to be educated. And in the past, many financial organizations have not really, you could blame the schools, sure, but financial organizations have been kind of taking advantage of the fact that many of us don't know what we're doing with our money. FinTech marketing, there's a big part there of education, of educating the customer. The second one is trust. After the 2008 crisis, a lot of us do not trust big institutions anymore, and they don't really have, big banks don't really have great reputations. So fintech needs to overcome these hurdles, these extra hurdles that maybe other industries don't have, of this lack of trust in banking. And so in order to do that, fintech marketing is all about transparency. We need to really build trust with the customer. And how can we do that? By being super transparent. And that's what we're seeing with many fintech companies, right? Because they're publishing their fees, they're communicating with their customers. It's very different. And this is like the second pillar that I would call it. And the third pillar is customer experience. I think we can all agree that now customers expect the same standards as they get from Apple, Google, Uber, etc. All this intuitive, user-friendly apps. And banks don't provide that because they have legacy infrastructure. And I can understand, we can all understand that. The thing is that customer habits are changing, and now we value personalization, simplicity, and an intuitive customer experience. And so the third pillar, I would say, of fintech marketing is being simple, being straightforward, and actually being customer-centric. So I just wanted to put that in there just to explain really why we care so much about fintech marketing. It's not just any kind of marketing, and it's not just like, whatever, let's just copy what other people are doing. We really have to sit down and think about this. What are we doing here? How is finance different from Facebook? We're managing people's money. It's not the same thing. I think we can all agree. And so that's why really I think I was happy to join forces with Annie. And this is why I'm so passionate about this industry and this topic, is because we have a huge role to play, and we can actually change people's lives with this. Because when people are in control of their money, that's it. They're doing a lot better. They're not in debt. They have control. They can buy a house. It's just having control of your money means having control of your life. And so that's what we try to do in fintech.
It's very meaningful. And what I can add here is that also another point here, for challenge that many fintechs are actually facing, especially in marketing, is regulatory side. So most financial organizations are highly regulated. So they can't just say, everything they want. They have to be very careful, when they're marketing their products and services.
Of course. So all makes sense. So thank you. Now let's delve into it a little bit more. specifically, if I'm a fintech startup, I come to you, what kind of services you provide? How can you help me?
Different businesses, different stages, they have different marketing needs and requirements. So depending on the type of business and the individual needs, I'll help in different areas. And then one of the main areas that I actually help with is, identifying purpose and the whole positioning of the company and putting together a marketing strategy in terms of, identifying buyer persona, doing some marketing competitive research, putting together the brand and identity strategy and narrative and messaging, coming up with USPs and then based on that marketing profiling, putting together tactical solutions and strategy.
I think the difference is that Annie offers bespoke services depending on what you need. You go to Annie when you don't really know what to do and you're just like, I need marketing. So I'm very specific. I only do content marketing. Just to answer your question, Rudolf, my short sentence is I help fintech companies acquire customers online with content. So basically, I help them manage their website. I produce the content. I help them rank on Google. And it's high quality content that is not only going to rank on Google, but also people actually read and adds value in some sort of way.
So say I'm a B2C fintech early stage startup, right? So what would be your advice on building a brand with a limited budget in the shortest possible space of time? Because that is one of the difficulties, right? I mean, a few years ago, people were saying, I'm a fintech, I'm going to disrupt the world and kill the banks and all this. Now everybody's talking about cooperation. So that basically is a partnership model, B2B enterprise sales. That's different. But of course, there are unicorns here, neobanks and challengers around Europe. And they had to build a brand. It is very difficult because it costs a lot of money, right? So how do you do it, especially in Europe, if you're not in America, where you can raise 50 million just to work on your brand, but here you cannot. So how do you build up a brand so that that is actually recognized by the consumers directly? So it's a direct B2C business.
So I'd love to answer this question because I think this is a very good question. And it is the question that everyone is asking themselves, right? When they're beginning.
Of course, right?
Any kind of startup, really. And what I'm going to answer is something from a book or from my experience in books that I've read. And I think this is probably the best kind of strategy. The best, I think, is to start by testing various marketing channels. Although I promote content, it's true that content marketing is not always for everyone, even if you're a B2C. An example would be Oak North. I mean, they're B2B, I know, but they didn't even start at all with social media or content. They focused on one channel only, and that was events with entrepreneurs, and that's what worked. So if you've got a limited budget, what I would do is, you set up like a spreadsheet or something, and you list 5 channels. These could be publicity, PR, search engine marketing, offline ads, content marketing, email marketing, engineering as marketing, partnerships, business development, just a couple of them, I would say around 5. And then you run some tests and see which one's going to offer the most traction. And I don't know, these tests could be cheap. So maybe like 1,000 euros in 1 month, something like that, nothing over the top. So maybe you spend 1,000 in 1 month on ads, and then the next month you spend on search engine marketing. You know what I mean? Like you're testing.
Yeah.
And so you test maybe 5, and first of all, it's also very important to understand what success means. So if this channel works, what does that mean? Does it mean X amount of leads? Does it mean X amount of conversions? And then you look at your competitors. What are they doing? What is working for them? What is not working for them? So you run maybe some cheap tests for your 5. You've identified 5 channels. You run some cheap tests, and then out of these tests, you have like 3 main questions that you're trying to answer, which is how much will it cost to acquire a customer? How many customers will you get? And of course, are you getting the right type of customers? And so out of these 5 channels, you try and identify one that seems to be working and you focus on that. And you can use your spreadsheets to rank and prioritize channels. So maybe offline ads are working best. Probably unlikely if you're a B2C fintech, but maybe email marketing, for example. Engineering as marketing is one of my favorites, which is where you build a tool, like, for example, a tax calculator, and you allow people to use it for free, and then they can sign up if they want the results, for example. It's a great way to add value while also, turning that into a potential customer. So that's what my answer would be. As you can imagine, there's no one marketing tactic that's going to work. Every company is different. Every proposition is different. Every target markets might be different. And I think it's best to try and just find that channel that works best for you and then focus on that. And then eventually, once your budget grows, you do other stuff. What do you think, Annie?
In terms of brand awareness, something that I can add here is that and I think it's really essential, especially in the B2C space, that you have to really think outside of the box and to think how you can be different and to do something kind of unusual. If you want to, generate quickly brand awareness and you want to get people's attention, the media's attention, you have to really stand out. You have to do something differently. And there are actually a few examples out there, about brands that have been very bold and risky. And, let's say they've done some interesting initiatives like, for example, this US startup called WePay. So they did this marketing stunt in the UK, in the US. One of their main competitors was PayPal. So what they've done is that, during one of the biggest PayPal conferences, they dropped a huge ice block stuffed with hundreds of dollars outside of PayPal's developer conference in San Francisco. And this ice block also featured the URL leading to a unique landing page with some more information about WePay. And the stunt was designed to call out PayPal for freezing customers' accounts that happened earlier, in the week or so, and soon received so much coverage both online and across the mainstream tech magazines. So they quickly generated this, media buzz and, word of mouth and the media attention. So this example really shows that how you have to think of ways to be different, especially in the B2C space, because nowadays everyone kind of sounds the same. And in terms even of products, you have to think of, be more creative, I would say as well. Creativity is the one thing that could really help, stand out.
All right, message received. So think out of the box. But there are some obvious channels, right, which Araminta was talking about before, like online ads. So do you think, are they worth any money at all? And can they work for a fintech startup? And when and where? Or is it something that is only going to work if you spend millions over a few years? Or what's your take on this?
Basically, from my personal experience, running digital campaigns for clients and working in-house, online ads can be very powerful. That's for sure, and only if they're part of an integrated multi-channel strategy. So essentially, basically, with all your marketing, your ultimate goal is to constantly follow your target audience and remain on top of your audience minds, right? But if you don't have a substantial budget, I would say that there are some other more cost-effective ways like content. And Araminta can actually talk more about the content side. But one thing that I certainly recommend here in terms of, when you have limited budget and when you're just starting, retargeting could be, in terms of paid advertising, it's something that could work really well, and it's very effective, even for, small businesses or early stage businesses who don't have that much, that big budgets.
I think, so you're right. Online ads are a bit saturated, but I believe they're a good way to test copy and landing pages. So maybe you're not really sure about a new feature or even a new product, or maybe even the copy itself. Does this sound good? Does this go with our branding? Will people like it? So I think online ads are a good way of just quickly testing. So as I said before, cheap tests. Online ads are great for just cheap tests, I also believe, online ads are essentially, if you're a B2C fintech startup are more for awareness rather than conversion. They're a bit like an ads on a bus, right? You don't really know, they're not super targeted. They're not as targeted as maybe other kinds of marketing. So I think it's also a good way to build an audience on social media. So it's more of it's a way of building awareness and maybe directing potential customers to your social media, to your content, to landing pages, maybe not a direct conversion into a customer. So that's what I would say about online ads.
All right. And then, let me follow up on what Annie said before as well, thinking outside of the box. So if I'm a fintech company, is traditional marketing then offline marketing relevant at all? Or which kind of things you can do, right? Yes, maybe you put billboards somewhere, maybe you don't, or you have a mascot that is running around the train station in Zurich or in Edinburgh. But what else can you do? Is there anything that from traditional marketing fintech startups can still utilize?
A lot of B2C fintechs are doing online marketing. So there is value in doing traditional marketing because maybe it stands out a bit. The main reason, however, that we prefer digital marketing is because it's easier to measure, right? It's easier to measure the ROI, and it's also easier to target. But that doesn't mean that traditional marketing is useless. Like I remember hearing stories from the B2Cs here in the UK, from Monzo, Sterling, etc. And they thought that they had reached quite a good demographic, and then they started doing TV ads, and the response was crazy. They had not expected it. They were able to target a much larger demographic, and it worked quite well. So there is definitely a place for traditional marketing. It just costs a lot more. I wouldn't say that it's maybe the best way of running a cheap test. If you're on a tight budget, maybe stay away from traditional marketing for a bit. And then once you have the money, of course, why not? And use it for awareness, once again, maybe not for conversion, but just awareness about the brand and all that. That's what I would say about it.
Yeah, I agree with Araminta. Traditional marketing is definitely not dead, even during the pandemic. And I think if it's part of a multi-channel strategy, it could be quite powerful. I mean, of course, it will probably cost a bit more, but even we have examples where, traditional marketing has been actually used quite effectively and cost effectively. And one good example here in the UK is the pension provider PensionBee. So what they've done was that they did some highly targeted outdoor advertising as part of their tactical marketing mix, and it proved to be very successful and resulted in direct increase in their traffic and accounts opening rates. They actually noticed the difference when those outdoor advertising was on. So I think there's definitely a place for it.
And of course, B2C and marketing, they go hand in hand, and B2B marketing is something different. So how do you impress the clients if they are your enterprise clients? In the past, it used to be also like, let's take them for a skiing trip or something like this, depending on their policy, of course. But what can you do these days in a B2B space?
From my perspective, what I've seen happening in the industry, and I think that B2B is definitely a bit more challenging. As there is this stigma that B2B is dry. I mean, B2B marketing is dry and boring, right? But it shouldn't really be the case. So, and lately, in the past few years, we've actually seen some really good examples of B2B challengers who are doing some really interesting things in terms of marketing communications and tactics. And one perfect example here is the FinTech consultancy 11FS and their media production model. I think that's really something that in the B2B space is working really well. I mean, obviously one of the ultimate goals for B2B fintechs will be to educate their audience, to provide some insights, to be informative. So that's a perfect way to do it, to turn into a media production company. And to be honest, I mean, we actually started seeing this even more. And recently, many VCs have also started adopting this model. So you can look at the first round capital. They actually employ internal journalists, and they have these amazing digital magazines. And that's really one way that you can stand out and build, reputation and brand awareness.
All right. So that's a good example, right? I mean, we had David Breer actually on the podcast in the summer. So a shout out to 11FS again. And you mentioned you've been doing this for a while. So can you mention some success stories or also lessons learned? I mean, this is an opportunity to brag and name drop as much as you can.
Actually, it's funny that we're recording this today because just today I released an article on my website with a case study, exactly that, a case study of how I grew a fintech's organic traffic by over 1,000%. And so, yeah, I mean, what I do at Mint Studios is really focus on growing a website's kind of real estate, online, so that they can use that website to not only attract customers, but also build trust and actually create a community. So one of my clients is called Minted. They basically let you buy gold through an app. So think, what Robinhood did with the stock market, what TransferWise did with FX, what Revolut did with banking. They've done with buying gold, right? Usually you buy gold through a dealer, and now through them, it's like just like an app. And so what we did is about a year ago, we started working together, and I helped them grow their content and help them actually acquire customers through their website, and also with content. So with articles every single week, with interviews, with research. And so that was a lot of fun to write about. So if anyone wants to, because I really enjoy writing out my entire process of what I do and how I do it, so that people understand completely what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've kind of detailed that in one of my recent articles. But yeah, I mean, what's fun about what I do is that I've worked with a lot of different B2C fintechs from all around the world, and also B2B. So I've worked with one of the fastest growing fintech companies in Southeast Asia called BigPay. I'm also working with a Bitcoin company called Mode Banking, and then Rooster Money. We also did Money Dashboard, another PFM app here in the UK. So it's very interesting to be able to write with so many different companies. And you're asking, what are the lessons learned? I mean, I can't make an entire list because there's a lot, but the main thing is that what's crazy is the huge role that content plays nowadays. Like 10 years ago, this was not the case. Maybe 10 years ago, people were going crazy about, I don't know, ads, Google ads, Facebook ads, growth hacking. And maybe 20 years ago, it was, I'm not sure what it would have been 20 years ago. But nowadays, Billboards, there you go. Or songs, I don't know. Radio was maybe 50 years ago, how every generation has their thing. This generation, it's content. Like you go on Twitter and it's crazy. Everyone has the next tip, the next trick, the next, everyone's becoming philosophers online and is trying to become a thinker, a writer, and and for a good reason, because writing allows you to think more clearly and to also kind of communicate and unite with other people. So I understand this. It's just very interesting to see how the huge role that content plays nowadays. So
from my perspective, I think what I see many fintechs and especially early stage startups are doing wrong and kind of focusing enough on is to have, when it comes to marketing, is to have a clear strategy. And to be persistent. And I think that's the main problem with marketing nowadays. We live in a short-termism, right? Everyone is looking that's why actually digital marketing is so popular and sought after, because everyone is looking for instant returns, for instant results. And but you kind of forget that, people tend to forget that marketing is a long-term game. Yeah, so basically, I think what's really, and this is what I've been helping, clients with, is to putting together to a strategy and to make sure that whatever tactic they choose is the right one. Because everyone could say that, okay, now you need to focus on LinkedIn, or now you need to focus on content, as Araminta said earlier, but content might not be for you. It really depends on the type of business you are and where you are at the moment, the market, product positioning. So I think the one strategic thing is that you need to really understand your clients, who they are, and what interests them, how they behave, where they go, because basically, you have to respond to their exact needs in order to convert them into clients. So that's what I've been helping with. And I've for the past 2.5 years, I worked with a select number of early stage and scaling startups. As I said before, I help them with launch campaigns, product launch campaigns. One particular client I'm working with at the moment it's a blockchain application, and I help them with pretty much I'm their marketing team, in one. So I'm helping with all aspects of their marketing efforts. So.
All right. So Araminta, you mentioned that you like to write. I just read an article recently about the fancy backgrounds on online calls, that apparently the latest fashion, or not the latest fashion, but what transpired over the last 12 months is to have a fancy bookshelf behind you. And so that's why I would like to ask you, or both of you obviously, what would be the best book that is related to fintech or that is relevant for fintech founders that I should put on my bookshelf when I take a picture for this podcast?
Nice. Well, Good question. Last year, I've read 4 fintech books, and they were pretty big ones, and I loved them. I have to say.
Oh, it could be a business book, to be honest. Obviously.
Yes, I know this is what I was going to reply with, because I think fintech books are very important, very interesting, but they're more for maybe people who are working in a bank. People who need digital transformation. Although fintechs obviously it's very valuable for them to read it, but I feel like it'd be even more valuable if a banker reads it. My favorite book, fintech book, I don't know, it's difficult to say, but my 2 favorite books would be Bank 4.0 by Brett King and Doing Digital by Chris Skinner. I read both those books last year, and it was pretty mind-blowing, all the information that was in there. If you're in the fintech space nonstop, like you are, Rudolf, you probably wouldn't find so much new stuff in there. Like, you probably already know quite a lot. But it's a really good way of summarizing everything. And Brett King has some really valuable insights because he has his own neobank, right? Movin in the US. And he's one of the OG, one of the original neobanks. And so he has some very interesting insights that I really enjoyed. And in terms of business books, if we're talking to fintech founders, it's funny because a lot of business books are very generic, right? And sometimes you're not really sure what to take away from them. So what I'm going to say is this book that might not be everyone's cup of tea, but it really made me think, and it's called Profit First. I don't know if you've heard of it. But basically, it's a way of being profitable from day one. And as we know, in fintech and B2C, neobanks and everything, everyone's always asking them, when are you going to become profitable? When are you going to become profitable, etc. And this book completely turns that concept on its head and says you can be profitable from day one if you use a different kind of budgeting strategy. And I loved it. Accountants will hate it, this book and the strategy, because it goes against everything that they've been taught. But for those of us who just want to see the numbers really quickly and make decisions quickly and don't want to go through this whole what's the balance, what's the profit, what's the loss, etc., this is just a very good strategy. I really enjoyed it. It might not be applicable to everyone or to obviously it's not applicable to huge conglomerates or huge companies, but for small startups with a small team, I think it's a very, very valuable book. I don't know. I think it's worth checking it out.
I think, especially for founders, what's really useful is to see what others been doing. I mean, I think one of the best ways to learn is by example. So, one book that I can add to the ones that Araminta already suggested is the FinTech Founders book, which is, includes a number of interviews, real life interviews with successful FinTech founders. I think that would be really, really useful for anyone out there. And as well, I mean, of course, I can also recommend as a resource, not really a book, but as a digital resource, the FinTech Marketing Hub, where we're also sharing a lot of successful stories and how they did it, stories, about FinTech and especially in FinTech marketing.
All right, all noted. And, hopefully we'll talk about it at our next chat on Clubhouse. We just had a first event there, which was about book tips, a light version of a book club in a way. And also had Brett King for the first year anniversary here on the podcast. And we talked about his new book that is coming out, which is The Rise of Techno-Socialism, where obviously the publishing date has been postponed because it's being updated for COVID. Hopefully it will come out in April. I don't know if by then we will have a final word on what's going on in terms of a pandemic, but fair enough. So shout out to Brett as well. And I'd like to then know, as much as you can say in these circumstances, what's in store for you this year? What are your plans? What are you working on?
For me, definitely growing the FinTech Marketing Hub and, of course, supporting my clients. But the hub is really a priority because it has received some really positive feedback. It's been growing steadily and quickly. So with Araminta's help, I'm hoping that we can grow it even further. And we have actually lots of things planned in store. So one thing is we're soon to launch a new podcast, FinTech Marketing Podcast. Araminta, do you want to say a little bit more about the podcast?
Sure. So I am an avid podcaster. I love podcasting. I've been podcasting for 3 years now. And we recently we didn't stop the podcast, but we were 3 co-hosts and 2 of us have decided to leave. And of course, that doesn't mean that I'm stopping. That means that I just move on to another podcast. And so with Annie, we thought there's definitely a potential to have a FinTech podcast that is focused on marketing, because as I've mentioned before, we feel that there's a lot to talk about here. And it's very interesting. And there's so many very interesting people that are working in FinTech that are doing the marketing. So I think this is also an opportunity to hear from some of the best minds in this industry. And so we've landed on the name Market Like a FinTech, and we're launching hopefully end of this month. And we're going to be end of this month or mid-March. And our podcast will mainly be focusing on chief marketing officers, marketing managers, heads of marketing in not just FinTech startups, but also maybe in banks and in B2B FinTechs also. It's kind of marketing and finances in general. How do those two industries combine, and what does that mean in terms of customer relationship and all that? So that's what we've got in store. I'm quite excited. We'll see how it goes. And maybe one day we can have you on our podcast, Rudolf, and you can tell us all about how you're marketing Voice of FinTech, for example, or other FinTech marketing stuff.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And good luck with another podcast. Now you're a serial podcaster.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of that before, but fair enough. Like a serial entrepreneur, right? So what's the best way to reach out and find out more about the FinTech Marketing Hub?
Definitely visit the digital platform, the website, fintechmarketinghub.com. And so you can connect with me and Araminta on LinkedIn as well. We're very active there.
You can also find me on Twitter at MintC I'm tweeting nonstop. And also my email, araminta at Mint Copywriting Studios, or my website, mintcopywritingstudios.com. My DMs are open. My email is also open. I'm happy. I love discussing this kind of thing. So anyone who wants to have a chat, just email me.
Yeah, same. Open to any new opportunities and interesting conversations out there.
Great. Well, thank you very much, and good luck to you, Annie and Araminta.
Thank you so much, Rudolf, for having us. Pleasure.
Thank you, Rudolf.
Thank you for listening to Voice of FinTech podcast. If you haven't already, check out also voiceoffintech.com, where you will find all the episodes and additional resources related to the podcast. You can also subscribe to Voice of FinTech on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, or any other podcast app that you like. If you have any suggestions on the topics or guests, or how to make this podcast better for you, please email us at info@voiceoffintech.com. Happy to hear from you. Thank you.